Thursday evening, we hosted the Christmas concert of the choir from McCracken County High School. It was a great concert. It was inspiring, and all of you Mustang fans have a reason to be proud. During the evening, the choir sang one of my favorite songs to hear during the Advent and Christmas singing season. They sang Mark Lowry's "Mary, Did You Know?" It's been around for a long time now, and if you Google "Mary, Did You Know?", you can find some wonderful new presentations of this song by Lowry out there in YouTube land. But I prefer Lowry's presentation of the song that he wrote. And I'd like to remind you this morning of the lyrics. Mary, did you know that your baby boy would one day walk on water? Mary, did you know that your baby boy would save our sons and daughters? Did you know that your baby boy has come to make you new? This child that you've delivered will soon deliver you. Mary, did you know that your baby boy will give sight to a blind man? Mary, did you know that your baby boy will calm the storm with his hand? Mary, did you know that your baby boy walked where angels trod? And when you kiss your little baby, you've kissed the face of God. Mary, did you know? The blind will see, the deaf will hear, the dead will live again, the lame will leap, the dumb will speak, the praises of the Lamb. Oh, Mary, did you know? Mary, did you know that your baby boy is Lord of all creation? Mary, did you know that your baby boy is heaven's perfect Lamb? This sleeping child that you're holding is the great I Am. Now, I hope you heard me say that this is one of my favorite songs to hear during the Christmas and Advent season. But on Thursday evening, something about this song as I was listening to it began to disturb me deep, deep down within my spirit. And each time the choir sang, Mary, did you know? I answered to myself, no, Mary did not know. Mary didn't know. There was no way on earth or in heaven for Mary to know the future of the baby she carried in her womb. Somehow, in all of these years that I have been listening to the words of this song, I have never considered that you and I might answer this question, Mary, did you know, that Lowry poses in his song with the affirmative. Yes, she did know. And suddenly, in the midst of that concert the other evening, it became apparent to me that many of us somehow do believe that Mary knew about this child. And we want her to know. Because if she knew, for some of us, the scandal surrounding her becomes less offensive to us. And maybe it is even acceptable to us, for after all, God is behind it all, and Mary knows. The more the question was raised, Mary, did you know? The more agitated in my soul I became. I must confess to you that this Advent and Christmas season, my soul has been more agitated than normal, primarily for two reasons. First, for some reason this season, I am more aware that the story of the birth of the Messiah is treated by more and more people as simply nothing more than a fairy tale. Somewhere in their being, they may think it's a little more believable than a fairy tale, but they really don't believe the story that they are hearing. I've also become aware of how folks like you and me choose to create a very wide gulf between ourselves and Mary and Joseph. We want them to be very, very different from us. We don't want to be anything like them at all. We want them to be holy. We want them to stay holy, because if they're holy, they're different from us, and we can't identify with them at all. Somehow, we convince ourselves that Mary and Joseph could go along with this scandalous intrusion of God into their lives, because somehow they certainly knew more than we know, trying to live with God in the 21st century. And it seems to me that we're able to take these 21 verses, and they're only 21 verses about Mary and Joseph in Luke and Matthew, and weave an interpretation of this event that is grounded neither in what the Scriptures actually say, nor in what a little bit of research of about 10 minutes would reveal to us. I want you to know this morning that Nazareth was not that quaint little village that we imagined in our minds. In fact, Nazareth is never mentioned in the Bible except in connection with Mary and Joseph and Jesus. The only reference in the Bible to Nazareth is a kind of negative description of that little town by Nathanael, who will become one of Jesus' disciples. And he asks, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" So I suspect Nazareth was as unlikely a place as any place on the globe for God to come visiting. If Mary and Joseph were shaped by the culture of their time, Mary, at the most, can be 12 or 13 years of age. For that is the age when young women were given in marriage. She was betrothed to Joseph, which means that she had already been given to him legally in marriage. But she had not yet gone to live in his home with his family, but she was still living with her parents. Their marriage would be complete when Joseph came and took Mary from her home, and they moved into the house that he had added on to the room he had added on to his father's house, where they would begin their life together and their family. Nazareth was such a small place that there would not have been enough people living there to sustain the life of a craftsman, and Joseph was a carpenter. So in order to take care of his family, Joseph would have had to travel all over the region, taking whatever job he could to put food on the table. Also, there's no evidence that there was a synagogue in Nazareth, a place where the men came together to study the law. And even if there had been a synagogue in Nazareth, Mary would not have been allowed to go. It is unlikely that she would have been invited to come in and listen to what the men had to say about the law. Yet if the Scriptures give us any insight at all, it is apparent that the festival of the Passover shaped the spiritual life of Mary and Joseph. The Scriptures tell us they went up every year to Jerusalem to celebrate this festival. Now I ask you this morning, from what you already know, what is the festival of the Passover about? It's how God, through His mighty acts, delivered the people of Israel out of bondage to the Pharaoh in Egypt. How does that happen? there are plagues. There are gnats, there are locusts, there are hailstones. And finally, the death angel comes and takes the oldest child of every Egyptian. These are the stories that Mary probably knew from her scriptures. These are stories of God's mighty power and God's mighty acts. But I doubt it quite seriously that Mary had any idea of the other women in the Hebrew scriptures that might have helped her understand what was happening to her. I suspect Mary didn't even know the names of the other women in her family tree. If you would, look at Matthew 1 and you will check out the women that are relatives of Mary. And I suspect that we don't know most of them either. For a moment this morning, let us play Jeopardy! The category is biblical characters. For 100, we have the name Tamar. Tamar. If you know who Tamar is, just raise your hand slightly. Tamar. She is the young woman who seduces her father-in-law. The next name we have is Rahab. If you know who Rahab is, raise your hand. Who is the prostitute who helped the Israelite spies bring down Jericho? Next name, Ruth. How many of you know Ruth? Raise your hand. Who is the Moabite widow redeemed by Boaz, who becomes the grandmother of King David? Next, Jeopardy! The category biblical characters for $500. The widow of the wife of Uriah. If you know who she is, raise your hand. Who is Bathsheba, caught in a scandalous affair with King David? Somehow, I doubt seriously that Mary at 12 or 13 years of age had been introduced to any of these women of the Bible who might help her understand the scandal God has drawn her up into. And I doubt, too, that she knows anything about Gomer. You know who Gomer was? The cultic prostitute to the god Baal, whom God told his prophet Hosea to go and to take as his wife. The foundation, the grounding, Hosea, of us understanding God's steadfast and abiding love. I think the biblical witness is fairly clear. Joseph and Mary had little of any awareness of what God was going to do with them. I hear us talking sometimes, trying to settle for ourselves why God chose Mary and Joseph. And I hear us concluding that somehow they must have been a lot better people than we are. And we ask ourselves, was it Mary's innocence? Was it her childlike faith? Was it her goodness? Just what was it about Mary? Well, I want you to know we probably seriously miss the greeting that Gabriel gives to Mary when he says, "Greetings, favored one, the Lord is with you." Unlike Mary, we're seldom perplexed about what this word might mean. But after much research, this is the essence of that phrase. Greetings to the one whom God has chosen. Greetings to the one whom God has shown grace. Both of those are a far cry from what we usually hear when we listen to Gabriel say, "Hail, O favored one." If I understand this translation correctly, the emphasis is upon God's choice, not some goodness or innocence or righteousness on the part of Mary. It is another example of how God chooses, just as He chose Moses and David and Isaiah and the others, and just as Jesus will choose Peter and Andrew, James and John, and yes, even Judas. This phrase is not nearly as much about Mary as we desire it to be. And yes, Joseph is a righteous man, which simply means he wants to do things the right way. He wants to do things according to the law. He's not always perfect. He doesn't always do things right, but he knows how to mend his relationship with God. And since he is betrothed to Mary, it is within his rights to consider her adulteress and do exactly what the law prescribes for an adulteress. But he's unwilling to put her to public disgrace. He will choose to ignore the letter of the law in an attempt to end quietly this scandal that has rocked Nazareth. After all, if you listen to the last words that Ethan read, Mary has already run off from Nazareth in Galilee to some hill town in Judea whose name we do not know. It seems that we keep drifting back to our favorite heresy, or what I would call our favorite distraction. When it comes right down to it, when push comes to shove, we prefer knowledge to faith. We prefer knowing than trusting God. And this is precisely where Mary and Joseph are so different from us. They do not know. They are perplexed and troubled by what has been revealed to them. And yet Mary says, "Let it be with me according to your word." And Joseph awakens from his dream and takes Mary as his wife. Mary and Joseph are willing to take the risk that faith demands with very little awareness of what God is doing with them. Their minds have been filled with images of a powerful God. Here in Nazareth, they are called to participate in God's scandalous work of salvation and redemption that is not grounded in power, but is grounded in love. And that phrase that says, "Nothing is impossible with God," which again we misquote, misunderstand all the time, really says, nothing God says is impossible. Nothing God says is impossible. The birth narratives, these stories in Matthew and Luke, are not given so that you and I may debate the character of Mary and Joseph, but they are offered, I believe, to us as a challenge, that you and I would come to live trusting God in the same way that Mary and Joseph are trusting God. But here's the clincher. Mary and Joseph did not know but we do. We do. We know the whole story. We know, yes, he opens the eyes of blind people. Yes, he calms a roaring sea. Yes, he makes the lame to walk. Yes, he is crucified and died. Yes, the tomb is empty and he lives. But oddly, strangely, however you want to describe it, what we know serves only to highlight our lack of trust in God. No wonder Jesus says to his disciples so many, many times, "Do you have no faith? How much longer do I have to put up with you?" Let's see if we can hear this story this way this morning. Two ordinary people, Joseph and Mary, residents of an ordinary village, Nazareth, living ordinary lives, waiting to finalize their marriage, are engaged by God to participate in his scandal of grace and love. It's a scandal. Mary is going to be with child before her marriage with Joseph is consummated. And they are both traveling very different paths, wrestling with this scandal, but in the end they are both going to say, "Let it be with me what you have said." Now, a while ago I called our quest for knowledge, our heresy, our desire to know God's will before embracing it, our great distraction. This is the way God works. We are very ordinary people, most of us. Living very ordinary lives, most of us. Most of us will not be remembered at all past our grandchildren when they pass from this earth. Except someday, perhaps, some member of our family will get interested in genealogy and they'll go poking around trying to find out who we were. Other than that, we will be forgotten. A few of us may have our names attached to something that will be here a few years after we're gone. We're ordinary people living ordinary lives over a very ordinary time span. And God's will for us is not revealed through angelic visitations. The way, the truth, the life, Jesus has already come. We have no need for angels. We have Jesus himself. And we spent all fall in this sanctuary, Sunday after Sunday, exploring what it means to embrace the challenge of living in the Spirit of Jesus. That has not changed. It will not change. It will not change. We already know what we are called to do. And yes, from some people's perspective, what we are called to do in the 21st century is every bit as scandalous as Mary's pregnancy. Every ordinary day that you and I awaken, this is God's will for us. We love our enemies. We do good to people who hate us. We bless those who curse us. We pray for those who abuse us. We turn the other cheek. We do not return violence for violence. We do not demand our property rights. If someone takes away from us our coat, we give them our shirt too. We give to everyone who asks of us. We treat others exactly the way we desire for them to treat us. We lend and expect nothing in return. We do not judge, for we don't want to be judged. We do not condemn, for we don't want to be condemned ourselves. We forgive because we desire to be forgiven. We are kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. We are merciful, for our Heavenly Father is merciful. Now, I can tell you what's going to happen when we leave here today and we awaken to another ordinary day living our ordinary lives. This is what's going to happen. Somewhere during the day, there's going to be a situation that is going to hook us. And every one of those dark prejudices that we suppress and hide are going to come bubbling to the surface. And rather than judging or condemning, we're going to say to Jesus, "Let it be with me, as you have said, I will not judge and I will not condemn." Waking up to an ordinary morning, to an ordinary day, we are going to get crossways with somebody. And the only way out of that struggle, that pain, that anguish, that misunderstanding is to forgive. And we are going to say to Jesus, "Let it be with us as you have said. We will forgive so that we may be forgiven." In this season particularly, we're going to walk the streets of our city and our neighborhood, and someone is going to beg of us for assistance. And we are going to reach into our pockets and give what we can without a grudge, because we are going to say, "Jesus, let it be with me as you have said. I share, for I have been asked to share." We awaken to ordinary days to live ordinary lives, and in those ordinary days we find God's will for us. The question is, do we have the faith and trust of Joseph and Mary to say, "Let it be with us"? Let it be with us as you have spoken. Let it be with us. Mary and Joseph are not different because they are better than us or more holy than us or more righteous than us. They are different from us because they said, to God's scandal, "Let it be with us as you have spoken." Faith is never knowledge. Faith is always trust. Amen.